Have you ever been frightened during a weather storm? Especially thunderstorms. They can frighten small children because of the loud thunder that ensues because of the lightning strikes. But there's one weather pattern that actually scares me a little bit more than any of the others. And that's what we're going to talk about here in this module. We're going to talk about two weather patterns, tornadoes and hurricanes. Now, I, for one, have never been in a hurricane, so I don't know what that is like. But the one thing I do know about hurricanes is that you usually have plenty of warning to get out of the way. So if I were to live on a coastal region and I knew a hurricane was coming my way, I'd have plenty of opportunities to prepare for it or to actually get in my car and drive far away where the hurricane isn't going to be. So in my mind, hurricanes aren't as scary as tornadoes. Well, you see, tornadoes, you don't have much time to get out of the way of those. And the destructive forces that a tornado can bring are very tremendous. And just the sheer sound of them is quite alarming as well. Now, I, for one, have never been caught in a tornado. But living in central Indiana, where I'm from, we have several tornadoes every year that come through this area. So you hear about them quite often. And we take precautions when a tornado is in our area. And we try to go to the inner part of our house where there's no windows and try to stay safe that way. But because of just not knowing and not having enough time to get out of the way makes tornadoes a lot more scary to me than the others. Well, a tornado, is a really massive amount of air that's moving in a circular pattern. There are several stages to tornado formation. The first stage is called the whirl stage. This is where the vortex first begins to build. After the whirl stage, we get the organizing stage. Now we're getting somewhere. When we hit the mature stage, this is where the tornado has actually hit the ground. And then you have the shrinking stage where it's getting smaller, and then the decaying stage there. When a tornado is in the mature stage, you really don't want to be anywhere near it. And so here's a warning sign I found that I thought was kind of funny. Yes, you definitely want to run away from these tornadoes. Don't want to be anywhere near them there. Let's go back to that University of Illinois website here and take a look at their page on tornadoes here. It says here that a tornado is defined as a violently rotating column of air in contact with the ground and pendant from a cumulonimbus cloud. So you need a cumulonimbus cloud to form a tornado. They can be categorized as weak, strong, and violent. The weak tornadoes often having a thin rope-like appearance is exhibited by this tornado near Dawn, Texas. These very thin ones, these are weak. About 7 in 10 tornadoes are weak with rotating wind speeds no greater than about 110 miles per hour. Still quite fast. A typical strong tornado often has what is popularly considered a more classic funnel-shaped cloud associated with the whirling updraft. Rotating speeds vary from 110 to 200 miles an hour. Nearly 3 in 10 tornadoes are strong, such as a twister on the plains of North Dakota. Looking northeast about 2 miles, note the spiraling inflow cloud, probably a tail cloud, feeding into the tornado. An important safety consideration is that the weak and strong tornadoes, by definition, do not level well-built homes. Thus, a secure home will offer shelter from almost 100% of all direct tornado strikes. Only violent tornadoes are capable of leveling a well-anchored, solidly constructed home. Fortunately, less than 2% of all tornadoes reach the 200+ mile per hour violent category. Furthermore, most violent tornadoes only produce home-leveling damage within a very small portion of the overall damage swath. Less than 5% of the 5,000 affected homes in Wichita Falls, Texas were leveled by this massive 1979 tornado. So here, Note the circular wall cloud above the tornado. This feature is probably close both in size and location to the parent rotating updraft, called a mesocyclone, which has spawned the violent tornado. Strong and violent tornadoes usually form an association with these mesocyclones, which tend to occur with the most intense events in the thunderstorm spectrum. Okay. Notice here that in these pictures, notice how the tornadoes are dark in color, whereas this one up here is kind of more white in color. Well, the difference is what the tornado is moving over. If the tornado is moving over ground that it can pick up, soil and dirt and so forth that it can pick up, then it's going to be a dark colored tornado. If it's moving over ground where it doesn't have as much soil to build up, then it's going to stay as this lightly colored tornado here. Here's a diagram that is showing all what's going on with tornado formation. You're going to have several different wind patterns taking place in a cumulonimbus cloud. We know that there's going to be an updraft. Okay, the updraft is a strong upward moving airflow. But that strong upward moving airflow is going to be hit from different levels with side moving winds. There'll be mid-level winds, there'll be upper level winds, and these winds, as they hit the updraft from the side, can cause the updraft to start to rotate. If that rotation starts getting violent enough, it starts producing the beginning of the tornado. Remember the whirl stage, where the winds are just organizing themselves into a vortex. And if that vortex continues on its own, it'll get into the organizing stage, and then the mature stage when the tornado finally is rotating enough that it hits the ground. And then eventually it'll start to die out in the shrinking and then the decaying stage of these tornadoes. Now here's an interesting type of tornado here, okay, often called a water spout. These are tornadoes that happen over bodies of water, okay, and they appear to be white because of the water that the vortex has picked up. There was a very famous picture that came from a water spout here. Here we go. And this was from January 20th of 2005. A water spout off the Florida Keys here. And then there's a paragraph here of explanation. What's happening over the water? Pictured above is one of the better images yet recorded of a water spout, a type of tornado that occurs over water. Water spouts are spinning columns of rising moist air that typically form over warm water. Water spouts can be as dangerous as tornadoes and can feature wind speeds over 200 kilometers per hour. Many water spouts form away from thunderstorms and even during relatively fair weather. Water spouts may be relatively transparent and initially visible only by the unusual pattern that they create on the water. You see that pattern that they create on the water? This is what pilots, helicopter pilots and so forth that are experienced pilots over bodies of water, they look for these patterns. If they see these patterns, then they know that they need to stay away. Even if they can't see the column of air, they know they need to stay away from it. The above image was taken in 1969 from an aircraft off the Florida Keys, a location arguably the hottest spot for water spouts in the world, with hundreds forming each year. Some people speculate that these water spouts are responsible for many of the losses recorded in the Bermuda Triangle region. So earlier I said that this picture was from January 5th, but that's when January 20th, 2005 was when this picture was posted on the Astronomy Picture of the Day website, but this picture is actually from 1969. Alright, now let's take some time to look at hurricanes. Again, hurricanes can be very, very devastating. The hurricane picture that you see on the left there, that is Hurricane Katrina. And for those of us that live in the United States, we are quite familiar with Hurricane Katrina. That is the one that, as it came in to the Gulf of Mexico, it was considered to be Category 3 or maybe even a Category 4, which isn't the strongest hurricane. But then as Hurricane Katrina picked up speed as it got closer and closer to New Orleans, it became a Category 5 nearly overnight, very, very quickly. And when it hit land, it was a very, very strong hurricane. And it caught a lot of people in New Orleans off guard, and caused a lot of levees and so forth to break. It caused lots and lots of massive flooding and pretty much destroyed the city. The city had to rebuild. Again, hurricanes, they are very devastating, but you are given a little bit of time because we can plot out where the hurricane is most likely going to hit. And that's what you see there in the picture on the right. These are the paths of hurricanes that have taken over the past, I think, 10 or 12 years here. And so what you're seeing is that hurricanes are created off the coast of Africa, and then they move towards the United States and then swing back to the right. Remember the global wind patterns that we were talking about? From the equator, okay, the wind patterns seem to be moving to the east, but then as we get further to the north, then the wind pattern shifts and it moves further to the west. So that's why we get this typical path for hurricanes here. Here's the University of Illinois weather site for hurricanes here. Hurricanes are these massive rotating storm systems. Okay, they're what we call cyclones. They develop over warm tropical oceans like that off of the equator regions of Africa, and then they have sustained winds in excess of 74 miles per hour here. These storms are capable of producing dangerous winds, torrential rains, and flooding, all of which may result in tremendous property damage and loss of life in coastal populations. This is Hurricane Andrew, again another very famous storm for those of us who live here in the United States, which was responsible for at least 50 deaths and more than $30 billion in property damage. So you got all sorts of information here about hurricanes that you can use for this from this website here. The stages of development you need to know for a hurricane. Okay. What happens is, we start hurricanes evolve through a life cycle of stages from their birth until their death. A tropical disturbance in time can grow to a more intense stage by attaining a specified sustained wind speed. The progression of tropical disturbances can be seen in the 3 images below. So we start off with a depression. Okay, this has smaller wind flows here, and then it develops into a tropical storm, and then develops into a full-fledged hurricane here. Hurricanes can often live for a long period of time, as much as 2 to 3 weeks. They may initiate as a cluster of thunderstorms over a tropical ocean waters. This is called a tropical disturbance. Once a disturbance has become a tropical depression, the amount of time it takes to achieve the next stage, the tropical storm, can take as little as a half of a day to as much as a couple of days. It may not happen at all. The same may occur for the amount of time the tropical storm needs to intensify into a hurricane. Atmospheric and oceanic conditions play major roles in determining these events. Okay. So notice here the tropical depressions that are pointed out in this map do not have any of the classical formation of a hurricane, the cyclone formation, but eventually as the weather patterns and the atmospheric conditions cause the storm to start rotating, and that's when it takes on the typical cyclone pattern that you see for tropical storms and hurricanes. You are given the different stages of a hurricane. Again, a tropical disturbance is the first stage. Tropical disturbance is where the wind speeds are anywhere from 0 to 23. These are basically what we would call normal thunderstorms that are happening over the warm ocean waters. And then if these wind speeds pick up, we can get to the tropical depression stage where we get 23 to 39 miles per hour. Now that's still moving pretty good. Okay, but typically most of the property that we have can withstand these types of winds. We get to a tropical storm of anywhere from 39 to 74 miles per hour. And then anything above 74 miles per hour is what we would call a tropical cyclone or a hurricane. And that gives us the most damaging wind speeds there.